You know you don't have to wear your PT gear anymore, right?
It's comfortable.
So how's civilian life treating you?
It's fine.
When I got out, I didn't want to admit that there was anything wrong because it felt like a failure. And then I realized, there's nothing to be ashamed of. So I started talking to someone. Maybe you are fine, but if you're not, it's okay.
Thank you.
If you or a veteran you know needs support, don't wait. Reach out. Find resources at va.gov/reach.
Hi, my name is Karen. I'm a mother just like you, and my son rides a motorcycle. So please check twice, save a life. Motorcycles are everywhere.
For more information on sharing the road, visit mass.gov/RMV.
Hello and welcome again to Oscar Mike Radio. My name is Travis, Marine Corps veteran and your host. Oscar Mike Radio is part of the Hubuzoo Network. You can find out more on hubuzoo.com. I want to thank my sponsors, Choice ASAC of ASAC Real Estate, Mark Holmes, Army National Guard veteran of Reapers Detailing and Power Washing, and my supporters, Cason Shaving Company, Black Cat Designs, and Green Compass by way of Don Dutcher. Thank you. 2023 is just almost over, folks. We're in quarter four, as we say in my world, and a good man reached out to me and we started talking, and then it's like, hey, let's have you on the show. And this is the theme for this year of learning more about what's going on and people who are taking action. So to get right to it, I want to introduce Navy veteran Tony Price of the Gold Star Foundation to Oscar Mike Radio. Tony, welcome. How are you doing?
Well, thank you. Thank you. And since it's Oscar Mike Radio, I get to be a smartass, right?
You do.
You could call me the token squid. Call me Token Squid. Incidentally, a road name that was bestowed upon me by United States Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel Bob Stephenson.
Well, that colonel,
He just,
lieutenant colonel, got it right.
Yeah, well, here's the dealio. He hosts a Marine birthday party on November 10th every year. And for reasons nobody can really explain, I haven't missed that party in the last 10 years.
That's pretty
about
good.
7 or 8 years ago, he got on the radio and he was talking about it a little bit to a local radio host here in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, where I live. And he said to the radio disc jockey, he said, well, you know Tony Price, don't you? And Tom, the radio jock, said, well, yeah, I know Tony. We've talked about his Gold Star Ride Foundation here on our program. And he says, yeah, Tony's going to be there. He's our token squid. So I'm the token squid at the Marine birthday party every November 10th, somewhere in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul.
So you're from Minneapolis. I mean, I can talk to you about that because I went to, my grandma lived in, and grandpa lived in Barnes, Wisconsin, which is like 50 miles from Duluth, right there on the lake.
I think I've ridden through there.
And
Barnes?
we went.
Yeah.
So they took us up in February to see, I don't know why February, but I just remember that it was punishingly cold. Like they say hell is hot. I don't know, Tony. Hell could be cold.
You get up by anywhere get up by Duluth, it's colder there than in Alaska.
Right. Right.
It's brutal when Minneapolis, anything north, Minneapolis and anything north. The winters are brutal. They're painful.
No joke.
They're painful. But Barnes, Wisconsin, that's up in the Chequamegon National Forest, or right next to it.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
don't ask me how to spell that.
But all kinds of names up there. I'm like, that's not how it's. I guess it is
right.
How it's right.
The Chequamegon National Forest takes up about 1/3 of northern Wisconsin. And I like talking about that because when I rode through the Chequamegon National Forest on my motorcycle, I refer to it as dancing. So when the critters run out in front of me on my motorcycle, I refer to it as dancing. I get to dance with this critter or that critter. In the Chequamegon National Forest, I got to dance with deer, of course, a black bear, a mountain lion, and an elk.
Who leads in that dance?
That was all one day.
First, I want to know, you did serve in the Navy. You are the token squid.
I did serve in the United States Navy.
What did
World's
you do?
largest nuclear navy, as we used to call it.
Yeah, well, absolutely. What'd you do in the Navy?
You know, I usually like to keep that a secret. I was an aerographer. And I know what you're thinking. Aerographer. Don't have a clue what that might be.
No,
A lot of people like to guess that it has something to do with photography. It doesn't. My job was weather observer, weather forecaster, and pilot aviation briefer. So my job was to, the first half of my time in the Navy, I was a weather observer, and I would report to the upper guys what the weather was, and they would formulate forecasts, and then they would tell the pilots. Every pilot who flew off that Navy base had to have a weather report before they could leave. In the second half of my time in the Navy, I was being groomed and getting into that stuff. So I was doing some briefing of the pilots.
Just a question I always want to ask anybody in the Navy who was in the air side of it. Did you ever serve at Naval Air Station El Centro by any chance?
No, but I did brief a lot of pilots who were flying to El Centro. I do remember El Centro being one of the destinations that the pilots were going to.
I always thought
I served in Dallas, Texas.
Okay.
So we were the gas stop. Anybody going from the East Coast to the West Coast stopped in Dallas for gas, and then off they went. And they stopped and get the gas. They couldn't, even if they were only there for 10 minutes, they couldn't leave without a weather brief. So
I just always, because El Centro is like an hour from Yuma, and I always thought these poor guys in El Centro had to do something bad to get stationed there. I thought Yuma was bad. El Centro was something else. But anyway,
speaking of Yuma, I got to spend a couple of days in Yuma just a couple months ago. So when we get to talking about the riding and stuff like that, Yuma might come up again.
Well, good, because I rode from Yuma on my Shadow 1100 to Boston.
Would that take you like a month and a half?
No. I did it in 8 days.
8 days.
Mm-hmm.
That's respectable on a Shadow.
Yeah, well, the only thing was that thing only had four gears. It didn't have the fifth gear, so it started after a while. Fatigue did set in. I have a Stratoliner right now that I really love, and it's miles better than that thing was, but it was reliable. Didn't so much as cough. No bolt fell off the whole way. It was great. So good stuff.
You missed out on all the storytelling that you get to tell when you break down in the middle of nowhere. There's a lot of storytelling that goes along with breaking down in the middle of nowhere.
I'm sure there is.
Yeah, but that's a good, healthy, what is it, 2,800 miles?
It was 3,785 because I didn't go directly. I went through El Paso, Houston, Shreveport, Indiana, and then over. So
okay.
I could have cut like 500 miles off if I had gone direct, up, or I-20 over to 95 up, but it's all good. And I ride
actually
now.
the shortest route would have been to go north up to Montana and shoot across.
Okay. All right.
That would have been the shortest route, but that a lot of people don't realize, the United States is this big, you look at it on a map and they see like the cow's butt over here and the cow's head over here, and they think, well, the quickest way to get there is, they forget that there's a curvature of the earth that takes place. So when you go way north, you shave a lot of miles off.
Gotcha.
Because the ball is smaller at the top.
It is.
Yeah.
So you get out of the Navy and you start getting back into civilian life and looking at.
I dove right into civilian life. As a matter of fact, I came back to Minnesota and I grew my hair out.
No.
Yeah,
I'm jealous, man.
I grew my hair out and I grew a beard, and I didn't tell anybody what I had done. And over here, you see my
National
Desert Storm, Desert Storm Awards over there. But I didn't tell anybody, and nobody knew. I'm with my MSL, my special lady. I refer to her as MSL over and over and over in the book. Nobody gets to know what her real name is.
Okay.
But we've been together for 13 years, and I told her, like within a year or so, and I'm service connected, and I have been since before anybody knew what service connected was. I've been service connected, I think, since 1992. But I didn't tell anybody. Nobody got to know that I served in the military. I didn't tell anybody. In fact, I watched one of your other podcasts with Mike. I want to say Mike Madsen.
Yeah, Matt Madsen, Mike Madsen. That was last
Madison,
night.
Mike Madison.
Mike Madsen.
So I watched that interview you did with Mike Madison, and somewhere along the way, a topic had come up where a lot of vets don't let anybody know that they're vets. I'm paraphrasing, using my own language, not what he was talking about, but that was a subject that he had to talk about, and I was one of those guys. I didn't want anybody to know, because first of all, I went in late. I had my 25th birthday in boot camp. Okay, so as a matter of fact, they called me Grandpa when I was in boot camp.
Oh, I'm
and it's
sure.
the only time in my life I've ever been called Grandpa. Even today, I don't have any grandkids, so nobody calls me Grandpa. Yeah, I didn't let anybody know. I hid my veteran status from every walk of life I ever bumped into. Nobody got to know that I was a veteran. That didn't change until.
Why was that? Why'd you do that though? I've always asked every veteran.
As I was saying, I had my 25th birthday in boot camp, which was in 1987.
Okay.
Which meant that I was 18 7 years earlier in 1980. So in 1980, the United States citizens would spit on veterans and throw water balloons filled with blood or urine on them, or in 19 different ways from Sunday, the veterans were disrespected in the United States.
Even up to 1980.
Yeah, it was left over from Vietnam. It was an incredibly strong anti-military thing that was going on. Even when I joined in 1987, it was still anti-military in the United States. It wasn't until Desert Storm came around that started to change. So Desert Storm actually served two purposes. One, we got Saddam out of Kuwait, but the other purpose for Desert Storm was it changed the attitude of the citizens of the United States to a citizenry that had respect and had respect for the military. But it was still strongly ingrained in my head that citizens don't like vets. So when I got out in 91, about halfway through Desert Storm or so, when I came home, no, I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell anybody for a long time that I was a veteran. I wasn't until about 2013. Well, after 9/11, it became a little easier to tell people that I was a vet. But even today, there is a very, very, very popular veterans charity organization that brings in almost $200 million a year. I'm not going to tell you what their name is, but
wait a minute, do they have the letters W and P in there?
Yeah, a couple of W's and a P are in there.
I might have heard of them.
I called them and I said to them, I'm a disabled vet. What can you do for me? And they said to me, you're too old. They said, we don't help vets as old as you. You're too old.
I've heard that.
So that happened. And they've been around since, I think, right around September 11th plus a day. I mean, they jumped on the We Like Veterans bandwagon early on. But anyway, so Desert Storm started to change the mentality of the public, and 9/11 really kind of, if there was ever any doubt, it really threw everybody into the mix. Now, I can tell you a story of, I met a guy about 6 months ago, and he was telling me he was driving around the Target parking lot looking for a place to park, and he finally finds he's got a disabled license plate on his car, and he's also got Vietnam veteran on his license plate. I mean, it's very easy to point that out. Anyhow, he pulls into this parking spot, and he jumps out of his truck, and a lady is right behind him and saying, "You took my parking spot, you big jerk." And he didn't say anything to her. He just pointed at his license plate. And she looked at his license plate and said, "Oh yeah, baby killer," and then rolled up her window and drove away. So it's still not completely gone. The whole citizenry that dislikes veterans, you can still find pockets of it. If I dare go there, I'll say it's just like every other problem between different sects of the population that you can come up with, including racism. For the most part, racism is being eradicated, but there's still pockets of it. You can still find a guy who hunts his own crawfish for dinner, who thinks that different skin color is a different species of human, or a different type of human or something, whatever. You can find it if you're looking for it. So it's still around. It's still a concern. We still want to do all we can for veterans. I mean, the big thing here, from my perspective, is that we want to take care of veterans, and we want to let veterans know that they should be taken care of. The truth of the matter is, particularly Vietnam guys, goodness sakes, if you bump into a Vietnam guy and he is not taking advantage of what is afforded to him through the VA, and there's a lot of those guys. But if you find one of those guys, you got to look, we owe you. The United States of America owes you. You're a veteran. You protected us. You did whatever mission it was that you did it. And that's kind of a big deal. And we owe you. We really owe you. You might be 80 years old, but we owe you. We've owed you for 60 years. And now let us pay it back to you a little bit, because that's kind of part of the deal.
You serve, right?
Right.
And
If you served, you served.
All right, but
I was talking to a guy last week who told me he was 55 years old, and he said he served. And I said, yeah, then you get to wear the patch, right? The patch says my DD 214.
I saw that on your website. Yeah.
Incidentally, if you want one of these patches, you can get one. It says my DD 214 can kick your MBA's ass. You can find them at our website, goldstarride.org. It's one of the ways that we raise a little money to keep doing what.
Ready. I'll have the link in the Oscar Mike Radio Show post, so no problem.
Anyway, I'm talking to this guy. He's 55 years old, and he said he served. And I said, well, are you service connected? And he said, oh, no, I'm none of that stuff. I got medically discharged. And I said, you were medically outed and you're not service connected? And he said, well, what service connected me? I mean, so I had to explain it. He said, look, I did my time. I'm done with it. I don't want to have anything to do with it. He's walking with, one leg's 3 inches shorter than the other. And he thinks he's got everything he's got coming to him. He said, no, man, you need to call this guy. And I've got my favorite VSO, and going back to Mike Masden's interview that you did with him, there's a lot of VSOs that really don't know what they're doing. So if you can find one that you can trust, that does know what he's doing, you spread that number out to everybody you can think of. So I gave him my buddy's phone number. He works out of Ohio. Incidentally, one thing I did not hear Mike Masden talk about is, if you are a veteran, it doesn't make any difference where in the country you live. You can call a VSO that you trust anywhere in the country. If you live in California and you want to call somebody in New York, you go right ahead and do that. There's nothing wrong with that. If you find the guy that you trust, it doesn't make any difference where he lives, and it doesn't make any difference where you live. That's a federal deal, not a state deal.
Yeah. So you get out, you about 2013, 2014, you start identifying and embracing that you are a veteran. And so so it was about 2013. But in 2013 or 2012, I can't actually even remember what day it was. MSL has a very interesting career. She rolls cigars at events where cigars are smoked. And she was contacted at a country club here in the Twin Cities. And they said, yeah, we're going to do a little raising money for veterans. And we would like you to have your cigars there. And she turned to me and she said, well, you're a disabled vet. Why don't you come along with? So I went along with her to do that cigar event at that private country club on that particular day. And, I met some other vets, and I learned what a Gold Star family was, because I didn't know prior to that. I didn't even know what a Gold Star family was. And they were this group that was part of the fundraising thing was going to ride motorcycles to see Gold Star families the next day. And they invited me to come along, and I went along, and I met 5 different Gold Star families that day. And I got to meet some incredible people who are still my very good friends. And I made a decision after meeting the very first Gold Star family that I was going to be personally working for Gold Star families for the rest of my life. And I'm going to be doing something for Gold Star families for the rest of my life. So I rode with them for 3 years. And after 3 years, I went to them and I said, listen, this is a really cool thing.
that we're doing here, taking care of these Gold Star families, but we're only taking care of 4 or 5 families a year in the state of Minnesota only. There's Gold Star families all over the country. We need to branch out and go national. And they said that they all burst into laughter. And they said, it'll never happen. You'll never be able to go national with a ride like this. You'll never be able to do it. And, you know, famous last words, tell me I can't do something and then watch how quick I can get it done. So I said, well, that's fine. If you guys don't want to do it, I'll go do it without you. So I co-founded the Gold Star Ride Foundation, and I started planning, and I think it took me about 18 months, and I was off on a ride. And I took off on July 2nd, 2018, which was a little over 5 years ago now. I took off on July 2nd, 2018 on a ride that averaged 307 miles a day, 7 days a week for 8 solid weeks. Interesting side note, out of the first 14 days of that ride, 8 of them I was broke down. But when the ride was all over and done, it was 8 weeks long. I made it to 44 states around the country. I personally met with 64 Gold Star families. That was all on the first ride which began on July 2nd, 2018. To date, when we just passed our 5-year anniversary, and my goal for our 5-year anniversary was 50 rides and 500 families in 5 years. That was my personal goal. I got 51 rides and only 494 families. But I also logged 120,000 miles on the motorcycle. I've been through, in 5 years, I've been through 14 rear tires. I just had another rear tire put on 2 days ago. So that was my 14th rear tire. I've gone through 2 motorcycles because, you know, I crashed one and that wasn't enough to knock out the motorcycle. We just put a couple of scratches on the motorcycle. But a year later, I hit a deer going 70 miles an hour, and it was me on the motorcycle going 70 miles an hour, not the deer. So yeah, I hit a deer going 70, and that totaled out the motorcycle.
You hit a deer. Now, I've known 2 people who've hit deers on motorcycles. One of them will never ride again. The not so much what happened physically, but what mentally went through their mind when that animal hit their bike. They're done. What was that like?
I get that. I understand that. I know where that's coming from.
Yeah.
Now, you spent a little time in the Marine Corps,
right?
Didn't you?
Yes, I was a.
Yeah, where did you go?
I was in Yuma, Arizona. I was a radar operator, missile guy for a surface-to-air missile system.
You didn't get firsthand what it's like to have your best friend standing right next to you when you go walking toward the bullets that are coming toward you.
I didn't serve in combat.
However, you were trained to serve in combat.
I was trained to serve in combat, and we were trained that, hey, if we don't shoot that MiG down, you're dead in about 30 seconds.
Right. So you at least have a working knowledge of what that means. So one of the things that comes from combat, and I'm preaching to the choir. I know this. I'm preaching to the choir. But one of the things that often comes from serving in combat is the notion that when your number's up, your number's up. And there's not very much you can do about that. So I take that, I personally take that one step forward and say, well, if my number's up, when my number's up and there's nothing I can do about it, I'm going to do everything I can to live my life as full as I could possibly live it until the very moment that number comes up. So for me personally, when I crashed a motorcycle, I got 2 guys help me pick it up and I rode it away. When I hit the deer, part of this has to do with riding skills. And I hesitate to say that because I have to boast a little bit to do it. But I'm certain that when you ride as many miles as I do, you collect a level of experience that the average person doesn't have. I've ridden, for example, in 5 years, I've probably ridden 25,000 miles in the rain across the country, barrenness, and I've been alone, and I've been through the most wild and crazy sets of circumstances. When I hit the deer, it was dark, it was nighttime, it was September, it was in Minnesota. I should have known better because the combines were in the fields collecting the corn and the beans. So they're chasing the deer out of the fields. So I should have known that I was going to come in contact with a deer in the spot where I was. The only thing I remember about the actual impact of the deer was the deer's rib cage coming in contact with the headlight. And that's all I saw. I didn't see his head. I didn't see his tail end. I didn't see anything. I don't know if he had a rack. I doubt it, but I don't know if he had a rack. So I'm pretty sure it was a doe that I hit. And I went from 70 to 20 faster than you can snap your fingers. I mean, it was right now I slowed down. But I managed to not lay the bike down. So
I was going to ask you, did you pull the clutch in or put it in neutral? Did you double brake?
There was no time for any of that.
Okay.
I hit the deer full throttle. Boom. It was, yeah. And then, we had a lot of shaking going on. The bike was, was out of control, but I managed to keep it upright. And then I managed to regain control. And the first thought that I had, as soon as I regained control of the motorcycle, the first thought that I had was, holy fuck, I'm still alive. And I would have cleaned that up a little bit, but it would have lost its impact. The second thought I had was, well, I'm still rolling. I'm going to keep rolling. I'm just going to keep on going, because I could see the lights of the town where I was headed. I could see them only a mile and a half in front of me. It was a little town, 2,000 people, and it was in southwestern Minnesota, a little town called Pipestone, if you're curious about such things. And I pulled right into town. I pulled up to the only hotel in town where I was planning to stay that night all day long. I had planned on get to Pipestone and stay there. I had 650 miles on the day. I started in Hot Springs, South Dakota, which is at the south end of Black Hills. And I rode all the way across South Dakota, and I hit the deer, and I rode to the parking lot. I put the kickstand down, grabbed my bag, went in, checked into my room, and I called my wife, and I said, yeah, I had a little run-in with the deer. She said, you're all right? Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine. Just had a little run-in with the deer. And I waited till the next morning. And the next morning I went out and I turned my camera on my phone and I started taking pictures of the damage of the motorcycle. So that's how that one worked. And then, of course, I called my buddy Head Dog, right? I'm Token Squid. We all have road names, right? So I called my buddy Head Dog. He lives in Indiana. And I say to Head Dog, yeah, I hit a deer. He said, you hit a deer? I said, yeah. At 70 miles an hour? Yeah. And you lived?
That's what I'm saying.
And then there's a big pregnant pause. And then he says, how many Gold Star families have you met with? I said, about 450. He said, I guess you got about 450 guardian angels, don't you? He said, I guess I do. I guess I do. That was the number that we were at the time when I hit the deer.
So speaking
there's
of the
a part
foundation,
two to that story.
we'll just speaking of the foundation, the Gold Star Ride Foundation. So you start the nonprofit as a way to take care.
I did start the nonprofit in 2016. I co-founded it. So we have a board of directors, and I sit on the board and I act as the executive director as well. Sure. And the impetus was I was riding motorcycles with this other bunch of people that were taking care of Gold Star families, and they didn't want to leave. They were just happy taking care of 4 families a year, and I wasn't happy taking care of 4 families a year. So now I'm really, really close to taking care of 100 families a year.
So a family up here in Massachusetts, this is where I'm at in Boston, says, hey, Travis, anybody,
You're in Boston?
I'm in the Boston area. Yep.
I've been to Worcester 4 times.
So you've been to Worcester. Okay. So say a family in Worcester has a problem, or, Uxbridge, wherever, and you're contacted. What happens from the time they contact you till their help with what you do?
Well, first of all, it's important to note that there's no such thing as 2 families that are the same. Even if I have 2 different families that are each asking me to help them pay the rent, and we've got a lot of them that ask us to help them pay the rent. But even if there's 2 families that ask us to help them pay the rent, the backstories are so incredibly different. So there's no such thing as any 2 that are the same. But as a general rule, they have to contact us. We don't make first contact with any Gold Star family. Too much respect involved.
They have to be Gold Star or just any veteran family?
There's a couple of different ways for me to answer that question.
Okay.
Yes, they have to be a Gold Star family. They have to have a veteran in the family, and there had to be a funeral.
Okay.
However, we are not associated with the federal government in any way. We're not associated with Department of Defense. We're not chartered or chaptered or anything by the federal government. We are an official 501c3 charity organization, and we get to make our own rules.
Okay.
So for us, we have concluded that the rule is there are two rules that designate a Gold Star family. One, did they put on a uniform? Two, did they have a funeral? And those are the only two rules that we go by. And I'll tell you a really, really good reason why in just a moment. But before I get to that moment, the DOD says to be a Gold Star, you have to be KIA. KIA is the only thing that they recognize as Gold Star. We don't have enough manpower to have a different designation for everybody that died in a training accident because their Humvee rolled over, or because their helicopter crashed while they're training in Salt Lake City, or because they jumped out of a moving vehicle at 80 miles an hour because they couldn't handle life anymore. And there's a lot of discussion that takes place. You know, I've met with a lot of Gold Star family members because their kindred was killed in action, and they get upset. They get pissed when they start saying, well, you can't call that guy a Gold Star family because he committed suicide. Well, you got to know the backstory. He didn't commit suicide because his mother didn't hug him enough. He committed suicide because he was walking across the zone, and the buddy on his left and the buddy on his right got blown up. And that's what he's dealing with on a daily basis. And that's what he couldn't deal with on a regular basis. And that's why the easier way out for him in that moment was suicide. Incidentally, I work whenever I can. I work as hard as I can for suicide prevention. And I would like to just put this out there for anybody who's listening or watching. If your phone rings and you see on your caller ID who it is, and you know that's a veteran, take the call. I don't care if that guy was an asshole to you yesterday. You take the call, because you don't know where that veteran is, and you don't know what ledge he's standing on, and you don't know if the 30 seconds it takes for you to say, I don't want to talk to you, asshole, call me back later, is enough to save his life. It might be. We don't know. It only takes a second to change somebody's mind. And it only takes a second to move away from a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And that's so I get a little bit worked up about that kind of stuff. Incidentally, if you look close, right about there, you see that unusual color of teal in our logo.
Right.
And that's supposed to be teal. Teal is supposed to be the National Post-Traumatic Stress Awareness color. And that's the reason why we put it there. Because if you look, you don't even have to look close. You could just glance at our logo and you go, that color doesn't match. And I don't know if you could tell or not, but I try to have a lot of fun with everything I do. But no, that color doesn't match. And that's the reason that we have it there. And out of the 494 families that I've met with in the last 5 years, I would venture to guess that it's upwards of between 80 and 90, between 80 and 100 that we went to honor because of the 22 a day, the proverbial 22 a day. Incidentally, I work with these families all the time. I think that number's a lot higher than 22 a day. 22 a day is just a number that makes the CDC feel good about themselves because they reported it. Because 3 years ago, it was 23 a day. It was 1 every hour and 2 minutes. Now it's 1 every hour and 5 minutes. That means in the time it takes for you to watch this video podcast that we're doing right now, from beginning to end, odds are a veteran took his own life in that time frame. So that one gets a little touchy. So I don't want to take anything away from KIAs, the families that suffered that loss. But I don't have the manpower to have 5 different names of what it is that which families it is that we're honoring. And now the other end of that same question was there's only the 2 requirements, a uniform and a funeral. And I didn't say anything about honorably discharged.
You did not.
And the story behind that is, this is a true story. I served from 87 to 91. And when I was on active duty, one of my immediate supervisors was an E6 who served in Vietnam. He had 17 years experience in the military. He started out in the Army and he transferred over to the Navy, and he had 17 total years in the military. And every 6 months at the base where I was at, the commander said that we had to have a group picture every 6 months, which meant whatever your dress uniform was, whether it's blues or whites, you had to wear that with all your medals and ribbons, and you had to show up for a picture. And I remember seeing this guy in his dress blue uniform, and you couldn't even see his chest. He was covered, left, right, and center. He was covered with medals and ribbons. I'd never seen so many. Still to this day, I've never seen anybody that had that many medals and ribbons. And also what was going on at that time in the Navy, probably in all the branches, was a zero tolerance for marijuana. And zero tolerance for marijuana meant that in the unit where I served, we had payday meetings. Everybody had to show up for the payday meetings. And at the end of the payday meeting, they threw a deck of cards down, and the high and the low had to go pee in a jar. Right? Urinalysis for whoever drew the high card and the low card. And I watched this 17-year veteran whose chest was covered with medals pull out a high card. And then I saw how he popped a positive. And I saw how they busted him from an E6 to an E5. And, took away half, whatever the fine was or whatever. And then 12 months later, he pulled out the low card. He pulled out a 2 of spades, and he popped another positive. And then they busted him down to E4, and he got a dishonorable discharge. And I wish I was still in contact with him, because I remember I remember very, very much about what life was like for him to be in a 17-year veteran, and having served in Vietnam. And then I remember him being booted out with a dishonorable discharge because he popped a positive for something that actually in Minnesota in 5 days, it's legal. I don't know if it's legal where you are or not.
It is legal in Massachusetts. It is.
Recreational use is legal. It will be in Minnesota in 5 days. By the time everybody looks at this, it'll be legal in Minnesota. I learned an incredible amount of military life from that guy that got a dishonorable discharge. And in my estimation, there's got to be at least a dozen better ways that the Navy could have handled that. And the idea that he's now, I don't even know how old he is now. I imagine he's 70, 75. But the idea that he had to live the last 50 years with other than honor or dishonorable discharge, that plays with my brain. I don't know how to wrap my head around that. So if his family calls and says, we want a motorcycle visit from the Gold Star Ride Foundation, we're going to go. I'm going to go there.
And do you go?
I have extraordinarily
alone?
fond memories of him.
Do you go alone, or do you go with people to these places to help people out when you get the call?
Well, we get the call, and the first thing we do is we say, all right, where are you? And then we got the big map of the United States, and we stick a pin in the map and say, all right, how are we going to get there? Because as a rule, we're not going to go 2,000 miles for one family. And I promised MSL that I would never do another 2-month motorcycle ride. That the pain and the anguish and the suffering that she had to go through in order for me to accomplish that was more than I care to ever put her through again. So we figure out where they're at, and we'll find other things. We'll find other events that are around it, or we'll find more Gold Star families that are nearby. So, for example, I'm in Minneapolis. Somebody calls us from Texas. They're in San Antonio. Okay, here's San Antonio. Here's Minneapolis. Okay, how are we going to get there? Next phone call that comes in, I'm in Des Moines. Oh, Des Moines, that's 1/3 of the way to San Antonio. That's pretty awesome. Next phone call that comes in, well, I'm in Kansas City. Okay, that's it. Now we got 3 of them, and we'll go see all of them in a row, and we'll knock that out. And that'd be and then we'll look for others that are, there might be one in Shreveport that we get to see on the way back up, or there might be somebody in.
I joined the Marine Corps out of Shreveport. I did.
We've been to Shreveport many times. I think 4, 5, 6 times we've been. Matter of fact, I was featured on the news in Shreveport.
No kidding.
So we've seen some Gold Star families in Shreveport.
You do all this.
So that's kind of how we work it out. And by and large, the vast majority of families that call us do not have a financial need. There's a lot of them that do. And we've done all sorts of stuff financially for these families. But the biggest thing that they want is for their fallen hero to be remembered. You know, so if you look at I'm pointing that way because that's where my trailer's parked. We got a trailer donated to us a few years ago, and I took the trailer to a print shop, and they printed up all the names of the fallen heroes that we had visited up to that point are all printed on the side of our trailer. And the trailer is going to go back in next week to be filled up with a whole crap load more names, because there was only about 50 names on the trailer, and we're going to get it up to, I think we're going to get it up to about 150. We'll have, and so that's the number one thing that the families are after is, let's remember the fallen hero. And it doesn't make any difference how he fell. They all want that. They're all real big on remembering the fallen hero. And of course, the cliche is that a soldier, and I use the word soldier to refer to airmen and Marines and sailors and everybody, but they say a soldier dies 2 deaths. One when their heart stops beating, and the second one when we stop saying their name.
I agree with that.
So that's the first thing on our agenda. And the second thing on our agenda is to do whatever the fallen hero would have done for whatever needs the family has. So, for example, we got to go visit the mother and the sister of an Army sergeant who was killed because she was working in the Pentagon on 9/11. She got hit by an airplane. So we went and took care of that family, helped them out a little bit with their rent. And that was because had the fallen hero lived, the fallen hero would be helping them pay for their rent. It was a COVID deal, so they fell behind on their rent. That's what they would have done. We have Gold Star sons. I think it's almost all Gold Star sons that needed vehicles. So we've helped buy cars and fix cars. We met a Gold Star mother in Billingham, Washington. Let's go crisscrossing the country, right? Billingham, Washington is on the Pacific Ocean, about 30 miles south of Canada, more or less. Give or take a handful of miles. Oops, sorry. So the Gold Star mother that we met up in Billingham, she said she didn't want anything. She just wanted us to remember her son. Then we talked to her for a couple hours, and we found out she's living paycheck to paycheck, and it's usually running out of money 3 days before the next paycheck comes in. So we took her across the street to the grocery store and filled up a grocery cart for her, and made sure she had food for a month. So we've done all kinds of different stuff. There was a family in Nashville, outside of Nashville, that I talk about once in a while. She called us up. She was a Gold Star widow from the Vietnam era. Her husband died of cancer in 1986 after serving in Vietnam. Of course, it was an Agent Orange deal. But a tornado had come through her property where she lived, and the county came through and picked up all of the trees that were on the ground. But 2 trees broke, and they were dangling over the roof of her house, and they wouldn't touch those. And she just didn't have the money in the bank to pay for a professional tree trimmer to come and remove the tree danger, because the next wind that blows, those tree branches are going to come down and they're going to come through her roof. So we took care of that, and we sent in a professional tree company, and they took care of that kind of stuff.
So with the time we have left, how can people help what you're doing, because you're actually taking action. You're actually interacting with the families where they are with the needs they have. And
We are. I've done 51 rides in 5 years. I average 10 families a month that I personally meet. So there's a couple of different things you can do. You can go to everything starts and ends at our website, goldstarride.org. You can buy the patch that says my DD 214 can kick your MBA's ass. Those are $10, and we make a few bucks off those. You can pick up a copy of this book, which is yours very sincerely and respectfully. This is I talked about being on the road for 8 weeks. When I got home from that, I spent a month making sure that my wife still loved me. And after a month, she let me in the house. And I sat down and wrote the book. So the book is all about everything: why I started it, how I started it, what it took to get a board of directors, what it took to get corporate sponsors. And there aren't any corporate sponsors aside from cigars. We love cigars.
I do too.
You like cigars too?
I do.
Well, heavens to Betsy, next time I'm in Worcester, you better stop by and say hi.
Will do.
Because we always have it's become an annual stop at I can't remember the name of the bar in Worcester.
We'll figure it out.
It's Huskies Bar in Worcester. Yeah, they call it Huskies because the owners have husky dogs, and the dogs are always in the bar. Anyway, we're always there the Tuesday after Memorial Day. Memorial Day, we're always on Long Island. I go from Washington, D.C. on Memorial Day every year from Washington, D.C. to Long Island, New York, where I do an in-studio podcast.
Oh, really?
So I guess when I'm up in Worcester, I guess the next day I'm going to have to come and be in your studio.
Huskies.
We'll have to turn that into an annual event. So everything is at the website. So you can buy the book for $20, you can buy the patch for 10, or you can just make a donation or look for whatever else we've got going on there. And if you want to come and ride with us, I go on these rides by myself. The bulk of the idea is I ride from Minneapolis to San Diego, California by myself. But when I get to San Diego, I'm going to stop at the VFWs and the American Legions and the AMVETs and the DAVs, and I'm going to try to collect as many veteran riders as I can, or civilian riders for that matter. And then we will go as a group to go see the Gold Star families. And that seems to be the best way to work things out. So, and we do it all over the place. I mentioned Bellingham, Washington. I was in San Diego on February 28th, I think, the day after Yuma. And I've been as a matter of fact, in 2023, in the first 6 months of 2023, I rode my motorcycle 19,000 miles in 38 different states to meet with 44 different families. That was just the first half of 2023. I have in 2023, the only corner of the United States I have not been in is Bellingham, Washington. I haven't been in Washington yet this year. As of the day that we're recording this, I haven't been there yet. But I've been in San Diego, I've been in Maine, and I've been in Florida.
All right.
And I've been every state east of the Mississippi River. I've had my kickstand down in it in 2023. And then I also was kickstands down in all the southern states, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California, which I did in February. So, the work is endless. I hate to say it. It is. I wish I could quit. I wish I could say, oh, there's the last Gold Star family. I don't have to go see any more. But that's pretty unlikely that it's going to happen in my lifetime. So I'll just keep on going. And you know what? Even if your listeners don't go to the website and click the donate now button, I'm still going to go because it's still in me to go. Incidentally, getting back to that, in 2013, I did that fundraising event. That's when I came to the realization that even if I don't want to talk about my veteran status, I have to talk about my veteran status. So I wear red every day, red t-shirt, red bandana, because we wear red to remember everyone deployed. And I keep my Navy rank is right here. I got a patch on my back for my part that's supposed to be on my sleeve. Right next to the patch, it says dysfunctional veteran, leave me alone. So we like to have a lot of fun, but the work that we do is pretty serious. One of the things that I choose to try to do with every Gold Star family that I get to meet, and I meet them all in person. Eventually, I meet them all in person. There's we don't have as much money as I would like. There are families that call us and ask us for things we have to say no to because we just don't have the money. So that's a very real issue that I have to come to grips with. But one of the things that we try to do, every single family, I have to find a way to say something to get them to crack a smile. If I can get them to burst into laughter, that's even better. But there have been 2 occasions where I was not successful. One was a Gold Star mom in a place called Mexico Beach, Florida. And she just refused. We posed for selfies and we did all kinds of stuff. And she not only refused, she told me that she refuses. She refused to ever smile again. She lost her son. She'll never smile again. The other one was in a place called Splendora, Texas, where I got to meet 5 Gold Star families at once at a Gold Star monument that was made by one of the Gold Star dads that I got to meet. He was his job was construction, so he designed and built this monument for veterans in that little town. And we had been standing around. We're just standing around in front of the monument. We're just talking, casual talking and stuff. And I looked at him and I said, and I was trying to engage everybody in the small talk, the convivial nattering that we have to start with. And I'm just trying to get him engaged in a little tiny bit of small talk. And I said to him, and he was clearly standing there experiencing a great deal of sadness. The expression on his face, great deal of sadness. And I said to him, tell me something that was really cool about your kid when he was 12. Now, and he was a fallen Marine. Incidentally, he had an older brother who was a fallen Marine enlisted. Older brother is a Marine officer, pilot, still on active duty. But when I said that to this Gold Star dad, he started bawling like a baby. I mean, he was convulsing. His shoulders were going up and down. The tears were streaming down his face. He couldn't stop from crying, and his tears remained constant for probably 45 minutes. And then when he stopped crying, he was still visibly shaken and visibly sad, and I couldn't get him to crack a smile. His wife was there. I got her to crack a smile, but nothing more than that. Yeah, he was visibly, that was one of the hardest Gold Star families that I've gotten to meet, was trying to find the words to let him know, if nothing else, that he wasn't missing his son by himself. Let me close with part 2 of the story, because if people are thinking about going to Gold Star Ride Foundation and .org, goldstarride.org, and making a slight donation, small donation, or even a large one, that'd be cool. If you're thinking about it, I want you to know that you're in good company. And this is how I want to explain that. You remember I told the story before about hitting the deer.
Right.
I called Head Dog, and we decided that I must have at least 450 guardian angels. Okay, so I'm on a new motorcycle because the old one hit a deer and it's totaled. So I'm on a new motorcycle. I bought a 12-year-old Street Glide, Harley Davidson Street Glide, and I'm riding across the country. I rode from Florida to California and back to Florida, and I got to visit 29 families in 16 days. There was a lot of it was in Texas. Holy cow, I saw a lot of people in Texas. But anyway, I'm on my way eastbound on this trip after making it all the way out to San Diego, which is 2,800 miles from Florida to San Diego. It was a lot more miles coming back because I was zigzagging all over the place, going through Oklahoma and Texas and all that other stuff. But I was sailing eastbound along US Highway 60 in New Mexico. And I had gone through, the last town I went through had about 50 or 75 people living in it, and it was 25 miles behind me. And 50 miles in front of me was the next town. This is, you're out there in Boston. It's really hard for you to find places for people to live. Out there in New Mexico, it's 75 miles between towns. And I'm talking about little teeny tiny villages. Anyway, The motorcycle threw a code. What does it mean to throw a code? It means that the computer has detected some sort of malfunction in the engine. The computer monitors all the engine components, detected that there was a problem, and threw a code so we can look it up and we know what to fix. So that code is like a 5-digit number, and it pops it up on the speedometer. But anyway, when it throws a code, the engine goes into what they call limp mode. The idea is you can only go 15 miles an hour, and you can get off wherever it threw the code. You can get off the highway. You can limp home. I mean, that's the theory behind it. So here I am, 50 miles from that town, 25 miles from that town, and I'm in limp mode. And I pull out my phone and try to look up the code because maybe I can fix it on the side of the road. No service. And I stand up and I spin around in a circle, and I cannot see anything man-made for 360 degrees. There's just nothing there. So here I go. Okay, limp mode, 15 miles an hour into the next town, 50 miles down the road. It took me 3.5 hours. I get into the town, I pull into a gas station. Okay, now I got service on my cell phone, so I can start calling up, find somebody to help me. And I find a tow truck driver. He says, his name is Alex. Alex says, yeah, I'm the only tow truck driver in town. There was only 600 people in the town, the whole town. Fort Sumner, New Mexico. It's where Billy the Kid was buried. And this is where I am. Only one gas station in town. It's a convenience store gas station. And one tow truck driver named Alex lives on the other side of town. And he says, I'll tow you anywhere you want to go, but you're not going to get your motorcycle fixed anywhere near here. I can take you either 100 miles south to Roswell, or I can take you 175 miles east to Lubbock, Texas. Those are your choices. And I said, all right, bring trailer, because I'm not going to sit here. Anyway, he brings a trailer over. And I said to him, you know, just right at the edge of town, 2 blocks ago, I felt the back wheel jump. Just, you know, I'm only going 15, 20 miles an hour. Just jumped. I'm only going that fast. I would have seen it if there was a pothole or a rock or something. Front tire didn't move. And he says, well, let me check it out. And he laid down on the ground right there, laid down on the ground. And he reached his hand up around my saddlebags. And he comes over and puts these little teeny tiny black things in my hand. I said, what the hell is that? He said, that's what's left of your wheel bearings. I said, wow, that's okay. That's wheel bearings. Anyway, load up the bike, off to Lubbock, Texas we go, drop it off at the Harley dealership. Now it's 11 o'clock at night. So I just lock it up. I put a note on the motorcycle and I go check into a hotel. Incidentally, you get to know somebody when you ride in a tow truck with them for 4.5 hours, because that's for 4 hours. That's how long it took us to get to Lubbock, Texas. So he donated the tow, $3,000. He donated the tow to the charity. Again, we're telling a story about why you're in good company. Anyhow, next morning I go see the Gold Star family. The Harley dealership calls me up and said, what are we doing with your bike? I said, you're fixing the rear wheel bearings. And as long as they went bad, you better fix the front ones too. And then you're going to fix the code. All right. See you in a few hours. So I go take care of the Gold Star family, and we do we're hanging out together. We saw the Veterans Monument and stuff in Lubbock, Texas. It was a wonderful experience. 3.5 hours later, she gives me a ride back to the Harley dealer. My motorcycle's sitting in the parking lot. I said to the service manager, why is the bike out here? He said, oh, it's done. I said, awesome. That's great. What did you do? He said, we put in new rear wheel bearings, and then we put in new front wheel bearings. And I said, and? He said, and nothing. I said, there was a code. He said, we didn't find a code. I said, did you look in the computer's history to see what codes have ever been there? He said, yes, we did. There wasn't one. There wasn't one. Okay, so let's recap here. Summarize what happened. The computer on the motorcycle does not monitor wheel bearings. It only monitors the engine. But if the engine doesn't throw a code, I'm going 75 miles an hour down that road. And my rear wheel bearings would have experienced a complete failure. The wheel would have fallen off, and they would have been scraping me up off the highway with a spatula. Okay, that's what would have happened. So we're calling this the guardian angel code, because it threw the code, put me in limp mode, made me go slow for that 50 miles, because that's what I needed to save my life. So if you're wondering if you're in good company or not, when you click on the donate button, at least 450 guardian angels think so.
Awesome.
I got otherworldly stuff. I mean, and since that, I've ridden that motorcycle. Well, shoot, I rode it from Lubbock. across Oklahoma, down through Texas, Shreveport, back to over to Orlando, Florida, up to Minneapolis, over to Washington, D.C., up to Worcester, up through New England, and back to Minnesota. And I've ridden it all over for the last month here in Minnesota. Still no code. Still no code.
Well, this is amazing, Tony. It's amazing. And I'm going to have you back on to tell more of these stories. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll have the link to the Gold Star Foundation Ride website in the Oscar Mike Radio show post. You know, Tony, I mean, I just want to tell you, one, rubber down and kickstand up. And two, you know, it must mean a lot to the families to see you come and give of yourself in this way. Thank you.
Well, you're certainly welcome. Yeah, I hope I'm doing good. I
know you are. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on. It's a pretty cool thing that you do, and you got to keep it up because, I mean, every episode's different subject, but they're all very important. So keep it up.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have him back on because we just scratched the surface of what Mr. Price does here. And I love motorcycles and I love cigars. And so I tell you what, you get the Worcester at Huskies, we're smoking.
Got a deal.
And we're Mission Flight, folks. I will see you later. And Tony, thanks again.
Thank you.
Join us on National Wreaths Across America Day, December 16th, 2023. Each December on National Wreaths Across America Day, our mission to remember, honor, and teach is carried out by coordinating wreath-laying ceremonies at Arlington National Cemetery, as well as more than 3,700 additional locations in all 50 states, at sea and abroad. Join us by sponsoring a veteran's wreath at a cemetery near you, volunteering, or donating to a local sponsor group.
Thank you for listening and watching Oscar Mike Radio, where our active duty service members and veterans are in action and the mission is in flight. If you are a veteran or know a veteran who needs help, please dial 998 and press 1 for the Veterans Crisis Line.